Hello everybody, it's me Franklin Bovolt the First, and today I'll be reviewing Wormwood by Chad Lutzke and Tim Meyer. Now, this book is probably the best coming of age horror novel or book or novella. It's quite short, but it's probably the best coming of age horror book I have ever read. Right? Keep in mind, I haven't read Stephen King, and apparently Stephen King has those themes in his books. But based on the books I've read with coming of age themes and horror combined, whatever, this is probably the best, right? This is amazing. This book is amazing. It's short and you can get it done in probably 2 days. If you set aside a day, you get it done in a day if you start in. But it is just an amazing book, right? It is just an amazing book. So essentially, the book. So basically, what it's about is this kid, Baker Gray, who is a 14-year-old boy, and he moves to Georgia, I think, if I recall, Georgia, in America, right? And his mum like keeps on getting promotions at her job, so they're constantly moving to state, so they only need to spend like a maximum like 2 years in a state. So he's never really made friends. He's kind of an outcast, and he has to adapt to living in Georgia. But slowly but surely, it seems like he's gonna be staying. So he makes some friendships. Seb, which is short for Sebastian. And he's another 14-year-old boy. He's a bit more rebellious than Baker. And them two just bond over gaming. And then Seb and Baker meet Cass. Now, Cass is a 16-year-old girl who she's kind of into weird stuff. She's not as there's something off about her, and you learn this very early on in the book from I think the second time they hang out with her, or at least what we see. Because again, lots of this book you'll find it kind of jumps in time a lot because all the chapters are chaptered by like a certain number from the day, and you only find out what the day is in the chapter, right? So it'd be like I think the book starts off. I think the first chapter is like 122 days to go or something until the last chapter, and it keeps on jumping in time. I think there's about, if I recall, like 20, 21, 22 chapters. It's not a lot, but yeah. Sorry, I got off course. But yeah, but essentially, you find out very early that that Cass is a bit, very creepy and weird. Well, creepy and weird to the reader, but to Baker, Baker falls in love with her throughout the story. He becomes completely infatuated with her, and honestly, right, if you take away all the creepy gross shit she does, right, I can kind of see why, right? Because when I was reading it, I was picturing like this alternative girl, right? This kind of like gothic kind of thing. So I can kind of get where Baker's coming from. But then it comes to some of the more gross out shit in the book she does, where you kind of have to suspend your disbelief, and then you realize at the end that really, um, she was grooming them the whole time. So that becomes gross because yeah. But I'm not gonna spoil the ending because this is one of those books you don't want to spoil the ending to, right? Even though I've just spoiled like a bunch of plot stuff throughout this whole thing. Again, you have the warning at the beginning. Don't get pissy at me. I'm not gonna spoil the ending because the ending is amazing, just because of how it reveals everything. Right? If you want the whole synopsis of the story and you don't want to bother reading the book, which I recommend you just I recommend you listen to the audiobook or you read the actual book because they're both pretty good. But if you don't want to do that, I'll link a YouTube video in the in the description where you can go and listen to the summary of the whole book. I forget the YouTuber's name, but he's really good and he reviews and summarizes like disturbing books. Um, so I'll link that in the description if you want to go and look at that, so you can spoil the ending for yourself. But yeah, what was I saying? But yeah, you've got that right. Um, so Cass is basically that's what she does for the book. She grooms these boys, especially Baker. You're not quite sure about Seb though. If she's, she is definitely manipulating Seb, but is it to the extent of like what she's doing to Baker? It is implied near the end that something did happen, like something to on the scale that will happen to Seb near the end of the last chapter happened with him, but you're not quite sure. So again, up to interpretation, really. Um, I'm not sure what else to say about the book without just giving all of it away because it's an amazing book. I'll tell you a couple of the scenes, so you can get kind of a taster of it. So I'll talk about the most. I'll talk about two scenes, which are probably more the tamer scenes I can talk about right now, because this book isn't disturbing in my opinion, but I've read Cows by Matthew Stokoe, so my level of disturbing is different because Jesus Christ, that's a yeah, but no, I'll tell you two of the scenes I can talk about on YouTube without this video getting taken down. So one of the first scenes is Baker's being bullied by this kid. I think his name's Corny, isn't it? Yeah. This kid named Corny, short for it's short for something. I forget the kid's full name, but basically this bully's been bullying Baker, right? And Baker gets beaten up by him, and Cass finds out, and Cass is like, "Oh, Baker, you gonna let him win?" And Baker, is just very hesitant because his mum promised that they would stay in Georgia if he didn't get into any more fights. The next day rolls around, or I can't remember if it's next day or next week. But it basically rolls around, and Cass leads the boys into the woods, and they're blindfolded, so they don't know what they're. And basically the kid's tied to the tree, right? And again, and no, the bully's tied to the tree, and basically she torments him, right, in front of Seb and Baker, and Baker's kind of conflicted because one side of Baker's like, this is fucked up, but another side of him is also like, well, she's standing up for me, and she's cute. So yeah, you've got that, and then with Seb's just kind of like finding it all kind of funny and kind of egging her on to basically because she threatens Billy with like a butterfly knife. So the whole time you're thinking, shit, this girl is crazy. She's gonna fucking stab him, which she doesn't. Because this is a slow burn book. It's not like she's a fucking serial killer. It's more of a she's like slowly manipulating these boys into her way of life, essentially. Um, but yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, but no, she friends the kid with the butterfly knife. So tormenting him, and then she eventually convinces him to take his trousers off, right? And come on, his hands are free, but his legs and all that are tied to the tree. And she basically she makes him humiliate himself in front of the boys, and if he doesn't, she'll just kill him. You can put together what that means. And yeah, so that's near the start of the book. Right, there's a bit where happens at the very start of the book where they first meet Cass and whatever, but that part is probably grosser because it involves pig, the pig body. But I'm not gonna and stuff. But again, that part's probably grosser. But I think the tree scene's a bit more disturbing, probably just in a reading it kind of sense because you get all the descriptions of um. What was the other scene? Oh yeah, the other scene. So, at one point, Baker, Cass, and Seb, there's this abandoned house on, I forget what it's called, but I think it's like Woodworm Estate, which is a part of the town. Which, again, ironic, you can tell what the book was named after in the story. But essentially, the Woodworm Estate, there's this abandoned house, which they end up naming, Worm Food, because Cass claims that, like, we all come in to this world worm food and we'll go out worm food. So they name it Worm Food Manor. The abandoned house. They basically end up they try to move in, which doesn't make much sense. At some point they try to like they're gonna move in, which doesn't pan out because again, the end of the book kind of fucking goes off the rails, so they're never able they're never able to do that, unfortunately. But essentially, no, let me get back on topic. Sorry, but yeah, they go into this house, and but Cass takes Baker the way to show him something, and they walk into this room upstairs at the end of the corridor, and there's a bunch of graffiti on the wall. Right, there's numbers written with like, if you want a nice time, call this number, and penises drawn in graffiti. And Cass is like, hey, look at that wall, what'd you see? And Baker describes what he sees, and Cass is like, well, these are all people's art, these are all people's souls, and it's beautiful, and it's everything we do is art, and that's kind of our whole thing. And even like the chapter is named everything is art, I think, I'm pretty sure. Which, to be fair, is a pretty iconic line from the book. If there's one line from this book I'll never forget, is probably that line. And fuck it, to be fair, there's lots of quotable lines just from Cass, because she is a very memorable character. Like, the way she phrases things is really like, you could imagine an actual, like, everybody has that one girl who phrases stuff like how Cass phrases them, which is kind of scary, but again, it's very realistic. These characters feel like this could have been a real thing that actually happened, And there have been similar instances to what happens in this book. There's one I can think of in particular, but again, back onto the book. Sorry, I keep going off tangent. But essentially, Cass cuts her hand open and smears the blood all over her hand and prints her handprint on the wall, right? And Baker watches all this, and it's described to us very disturbingly, because again, she's using the butterfly knife, and then she convinces Baker to do the same. And then you're like, okay, this is getting extreme now. And then eventually, after Baker does it, they like interlock fingers, so as Baker puts it, they become one, and he describes very vividly how he feels being one with her through her blood and other orifices, which, yeah, that comes up near the end of the book, which, yeah, if you're not comfortable reading about people under the age of 18 getting it on, don't read this book, because especially if you're a very visual listener, like, not listener, but if you read stuff, or like if you listen to someone talk about it, like if you're using the audiobook and you get uncomfortable by descriptions of that happening, don't just skip over some of the chapters. Like, just not chapters, but when you sense those parts are coming up, just skip over them to the next chapter, because yeah, there's some implied parts like that. And again, Baker's descriptions are very 14-year-old boyish, and every guy who's watching this video right now will know what I mean. every guy knows. But yeah, but that happens in the book, which again is probably one of the tamer things that happens, ironically. Again, the most shocking part is probably the ending, because again, the reveals of Cass's past is crazy. Like, it actually kind of like, oh my god, like you kind of say everybody in this book is empathetic as well. That's another thing, even though there's like, because Cass isn't the bad guy, right? Spoilers. Cass isn't the bad guy in this book. But the guy who is still, even though he's a piece of shit and you don't empathize with him by the end, again, with the chapters you do spend with him, you do kind of feel bad for him initially, right? But then by the end, when you realize what he's done, you're like, oh, fuck him, he's a pig, The characters even state so, again, near the last chapter. So every character in this book is empathetic, even the ones who are dubious, like Seb and I think the school therapist, who are a bit more dubious in the book when it comes to their motives, or not motives, but actions, I should say, actions. But yeah, even them, like, you still feel bad for them, even though they both do bad stuff, you still feel bad for them. Even Cash you feel bad for, even though she's like basically grooming these boys, which again is very bad. I don't want to say that what like her good traits or what she's been through excuses it, but it once you understand why she is the way she is, you kind of are like, oh, this is just the cycle of abuse, and it's like, yeah, I probably just spoiled it right there by saying that, but trust me, the reveal is like the reveal of everything at the end is fucking crazy, and the ending isn't like sad because the last chapter is very much the last chapter, the day chapter, I should say, because the last chapter is not actually that bad, but the day chapter, the big climax. That's crazy, right? That's like holy shit, right? And then after that, where it cuts, like I think a couple months later, I think 3 or 2 months later, I think it's not that bad. So, yeah. So it's kind of a happy ending. It's more of a bittersweet ending, I would say. Because no, I'm not gonna spoil it, actually. But no, it's kind of a bittersweet ending, and it kind of wraps everything up, and it's quite nice. But yeah, but that I think I'm gonna finish up my review there. Let me quickly rate this. I would rate this book on a scale to of again we here I rate it on like from 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, probably a 9.5. 9.5 I'd probably rate this book. It's really amazing. I'd recommend this book to any like late teenagers, like 16 and over, right? Because I feel like kids 16 or older will resonate with this book, and kind of because as somebody who's 17, every like late teenager can remember what they were like when they were 14, right? And everybody who is like 16, 17 knows a friend that like Cass, or like similar in personality, not in the like at the actions, hopefully. So I feel like late teenagers will relate to this book, and the book, it does have disturbing parts, but I feel like most late teenagers can handle it. I don't think people under the age of 16 should read this book though, because again, it is way too intense for them. But yeah, I highly recommend this book. Again, great coming of age horror story. Um, yeah, that's Franklin Bovart the First signing off.